This is my team site report of our site Grand Park in Los Angeles. Looking at the site plan of Grand Park and our site for this semester, one of the first things to note is the linearity of the park and how the site is offset from this pattern. There is, however, a unifying feature in that all of the surrounding buildings play key roles in government and communications. Being in a fairly dense area of LA, the site is a wide open area compared to the more urban and dense areas to the west of the site. The sections allow us to understand the scale of the park in relation to the large buildings surrounding it. To the east and south are City Hall and another large building. However, due to where the sun is located and how it moves, the building on the same block as the site will largely cover it in shadows. But for the most part, it is a sunny open area with not much shade, but with large enclosed areas due to nearby government buildings. So with this site comes the history behind it, and in general, the history of the development of LA. I found that I can generalize the history of LA into 4 periods. The land that Los Angeles was established on was the land of the Tongva and the Chumash native tribes, being recorded to have lived in this area since 3000 BC. Around 1781, early Spanish and Mexican settlers established a farming community in this area and named the community the Town of Our Lady, the Queen of Angels of the River Portucula. During this time, the tribes living in this area were overtaken, displaced, and enslaved by these settlers. The community continued to grow with the major development in the 1820s to the 1850s, with the rise of immigration and industry. In 1850, the first map of the city of Los Angeles was drawn. Since 1926 to present day, Los Angeles has seen even further development and expansion. An important part of this further development was the establishment of roads and freeways. These freeways, like the 101 near the site or the 60, are now integral for traveling California's counties and cities. As Los Angeles grew, formal and informal districts were created to compartmentalize the large city. Around the site, there are 4 districts: the Civic Center, Chinatown, Bunker Hill or the Financial District, and Little Tokyo. Many things can be a informal district such as regions, but I found a map containing the territories of different gangs in Los Angeles. And as you can see, these gang districts don't follow the formal district boundaries, thus their categorization as an informal district. This diagram identifies the different types of buildings surrounding the site and what their use to the public is. The diagram shows that there is a high number of government buildings, including the Los Angeles City Hall, the Los Angeles Superior Court, and the LAPD headquarters, to name a few. This gives an idea of the type of workers and visitors that frequent this area and how other buildings like the restaurants serve the public. This diagram surveys the different services and useful features and how accessible these amenities are. For example, in Grand Park, there are a few dedicated seating areas. However, most of the seating have barriers that can prevent overcrowding, but also can prevent someone from laying down on the seats. Because of the groups of unhoused people that live around the site, different amenities like the seats or covered stops are not as accessible as they are in other areas around the site. Activity is another category that is studied through diagrams. This one highlights activities that are executed on the site. Certain areas enable more active activities like Grand Park, while buildings such as the Clara Shortridge Folk Criminal Justice Center are dedicated to static and stationary activities. However, there are places that enable both. An example of this is stairs. It allows users to travel from one elevation to another, but also serves as a seating area. This diagram assesses which areas of the site and city are accessible for the public at all times, which are kept private from the general public, and which areas are accessible under special circumstances. The public parks are examples of areas that the general public is free to roam about. However, the government buildings that require appointments or are only for the workers of the buildings are areas of private spaces. There are some areas that fall within both categories, like LA City Hall, which allows visitors to come in but only to specific areas. This chart studies the users of the site by highlighting the areas which visitors, commuters, and the unhoused occupy. The buildings are categorized by their privacy level. One example of this is the City Hall, where it is both a public and private structure. The access is limited. Visitors are only allowed to occupy certain areas, while the majority remains private to only the members and commuters of City Hall. Another example is the LA Law Library. This structure categorized under both because it is occupied by both staff and visitors throughout the building. On the right side of the diagram, there are pie charts studying the demographics of certain buildings and the ratio of visitors to commuters. The paths and nodes diagram mark up the elements of travel and define how there is movement around the site. This is depicted how pedestrians travel versus how people in vehicles or bikes travel. The paths that pedestrian would take include the sidewalks and ramps, whereas bike travel is done in a specific area on the road. The nodes that are included in this diagram show heightened areas of activity or where the paths lead people. For example, in Grant Park, the path leads people towards the center, creating a channel. This diagram highlights the softscape and hardscape seen throughout the site. However, they are further broken down by height. There are more subtle hardscapes, such as pavement and sidewalks, that contrast the taller structures, such as buildings. The same concept is applied to the softscape seen on the site, such as grass and gravel versus trees and shrubs. This diagram focuses on comparing or contrast between softscape and hardscape, but the two are both a type of edge and boundary. Boundaries are studied in this diagram. It categorizes the array of structures and components of the site into subtle boundaries such as sidewalks and buildings below 20 feet, and compares them to obstructive boundaries such as buildings 100 feet and above that interrupt the user's field of view. The roads and softscapes are another category of boundary that is addressed within this diagram. And in this diagram, it points out the landmarks within and around the site. The diagram categorizes the landmarks into three categories: historical, visual, and architectural. Landmarks in general are structures that become well known in a specific area. Historical landmarks are ones that memorialize or record certain periods of time, events, and people, such as the Arthur J. Will Fountain. Visual landmarks are essentially public art displays, structures that have not the purpose of being a building, but the purpose of being visually pleasing, to break the industrial or urban look of the building, like the art display, The Evolution of Los Angeles. Architectural landmarks are buildings that have become well known due to their unique, technically impressive, or complex designs, such as the Walt Disney Concert Hall or the United States Courthouse. Thank you.